see. I refer to the series of step-like recessions in its profile. And you see those patios that are cut away, they actually correspond roughly to the height of buildings in the neighborhood. That way, be part of the neighborhood. Don't overtake it, embrace it a little more. Now, you know when Jeannie Gang got the award, the tallest building in the world, by a woman with architecture, sadly she had to take it away from someone. So she took it away from herself, because she won it originally for that building on our left with the curvy balconies, Jeannie's first skyscraper in 2009, Aqua Towers, looks like a wave, 859 feet. And those balconies are all site-specific. Jeannie found a view out here and then moved the balconies left to right so everyone would have a view. Now when we come under this bridge, check out, there's a really cool building, and it has an almost mosque-like orange, big yellow onion skin dome. This is the Hotel Intercontinental, built in 1929 as the Medina Athletic Club, a project that the philanthropic group will call themselves the Sons of the East. You might know them for their circuses, their go-karts, fezzes, and their hospitals, the Medina Shriners. Now back in the 30s, just look at that dome and think about this. Somebody had a grand idea. Let's use that big yellow ball as a landing pad for airships, like the Goodyear blimp. Well, I must tell you, that steampunk dream would die. Anyone remember a little thing called the Hindenburg? Dirigibles, Zeppelins kind of fell out of favor after that crash. London can have Big Ben, in Paris it's Eiffel Tower. I'm a Chicago. I'll take the Wrigley Building. The clock tower coming up, 1921. North Base added 1924. Commissioned by Chewing Gum King William Wrigley Jr., who was a young man selling juicy fruit gum for the first time at the Columbian Exposition World's Fair. He brings the fair home. Daniel Burnham's style for the World's Fair, revivalism. It came out of Paris, France. You know, it was back to the cradle of Western civilization, Greece to Rome. Through that spot architecture to uproot the soul of the people. We could call this Spanish Renaissance. That clock tower is actually modeled after the 11th century Giralda Tower in Seville in Spain. The temple portion, I'll take that way back to 3003 BC, inspired by the Temple of Socrates. And now we are coming to our Grand Boulevard, Michigan Avenue. This is where you're going to spend your money on the Magnificent Mile shopping district later. We often call it, in the French manner, Boulevard Mich. It was inspired by the wide boulevards of Paris. In fact, Daniel Burnham wanted Chicago to be called Paris on the Prairie. But we call the bridge Du Sable Bridge, my friends, because we're going to honor our first permanent resident, the French-speaking fur trader from Haiti, Jean-Baptiste Pont du Sable. He started the fur trading empire right there as early as 1779. You go up that stairs later, and there is a bust of Mr. Du Sable to take a photo with. Now you see the influence of the World's Fair again. Check out the Jewelers Building with the cupola dome and the water tanks. Inspired by a 15th century Italian monastery, the St.Patricks de Paris, built here for the diamond trade. In 1926, you could drive your Model T from Lower Wacker Drive into the basement, your car lifted by elevator. Movie fans, you might remember those water tanks. Christian Bale in Batman Begins, at the end of the movie, he's sitting on that water tank overseeing Chicago, which had become Gotham City at that time. So, coming up on our right now, there's a black box building coming up, and this is a style I think most people feel familiar with, the modern skyscraper, modernism. Modernism was born at the Bauhaus, which was an art compound in 1920s Germany, long before it became a 1980s post-punk industrial band of the same name. Now, the third director of the famous Bauhaus in Germany was Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He's the architect of this black box building, AMA Plaza, in 1971. This is modernism. You have to understand the Bauhaus architects, the modernists, were about celebrating structure and the use of materials. They didn't believe in decoration or imitation. That would be bourgeois, superfluous, dishonest. They felt the honesty of a building was its structure, right? And so in this case, you may have heard a famous expression by Mies van der Rohe, less is more. So in modernism, think of it this way. I'm going to give you three terms. Easiest thing, easiest pie, right? In modernism, what do you need? Skeleton, skin, and space. Skeleton, the frame holding the building up. Skin, the glass curtain wall, and space. 90% of the time, everything was a box for a long time, right? But check it out. There's a rebel in the crowd, Bertrand Goldberg. Never did like squares. And it's circular Marina City towers. And you see how they are in their 60s nickname? We still call these the corn cobs. The corn cob towers. And if you get both of these buildings in a photo, The student rejects the teacher. Goldberg had studied with Mies van der Rohe, but he preferred a circle to embrace and bring people together. He called this curvilinear flower form a stem, right? Like a flower that houses the utilities, the core, and the elevators, and then the rings like petals. Now another thing is the city, this is the first like residential living along the river. In the 60s, you didn't have any cafes along the river. This was all industrial. So Goldberg partnered with the janitors union because people work downtown, they want to commute. They want to live right where they work. So this was the first affordable living. 4 restaurants, bowling alley, swimming pool, bank, George Jensen parking, you need a valet. And your living space upstairs. He was popular. A couple of years ago, I was at a party on the roof of that. My manager was on the edge taking pictures. I was very happy to do. The views were spectacular. Oh, hey, please stare at 55 Westwacker Drive on our left to understand its style. That's a subset of modernism. You would call that brutalism, coming from the French béton brut or raw concrete. The brutalists were modernists who took too many steroids. Yeah, they celebrate structure, they go a little heavy though. Brutalism is a style that wanted to last forever, give your institution a sense of gravitas. Very popular with university campuses and public institutions. Now step back with me to 1913, the Reid Murdoch Center on our right by George Niemans, an architect who, like the great Frank Lloyd Wright, was associated with the Prairie School architecture. Little one, don't be standing on the bench, please, for safety, thank you. Prairie School architecture, we evoke our flat Midwestern landscape to design more horizon-hugging than vertical. Called the bays, it's asymmetrical. 5 of those bays on the right, only 4 of the 20-foot bays on the left. The 5th bay had to go out when the LaSalle Street Bridge was put in. You see, the building came out too far west, so they locked it off. They de-widened it. Oh, I just made up the word de-widen. Yeah, that's not really a word. Don't try to use it in Scrabble. Now, to understand where you're going, it never hurts to look back at where you've been and how Chicago became the birthplace of the skyscraper dealt with that great Chicago fire. You see, most of the buildings were made out of wood. Chicago was a tinderbox before the fire. So after the fire, you wouldn't take Chicago. You're left with brick. But a load-bearing exterior brick wall has to get 6 inches wider for every new floor. You go very high, your floor space is eaten up. So in 1885, a Civil War brigadier Baron introduces something new. The iron and steel grid frame or skeleton, like any modern building. Boom. That leads to the period called the Chicago School. And here's an example. The first skyscrapers, just 10 or 12 stories. But you see the big change from a wall supporting the weight to a skeleton. And you see what that did. Now you can open up a building to natural light with those really big windows. In the building trade, you can even call that a Chicago. On our right now, another architectural style, the style that truly put the roar in the roaring 20s, Art Deco. Now when I say Art Deco, you can think the Great Gatsby, the Jazz Age. It's America in the 1920s, unbridled optimism and prosperity. The country's moving forward without end. And the massive yet streamlined look of Art Deco represents that. It was like the attitude was, we don't want that European handcrafted model. This is America. We want everything to look machine-made. Oh, by the way, largest structure in America prior to completion of the Pentagon. 4,600 windows, 7 miles of hallways. You don't have to give the merchandise mart its own zip code. $32 million to build this. The Marshall Field Department Store commissioned it. Dreamed of a giant wholesale market, woke up to the Great Depression. Had to sell it for $13.5 million to Joe Kennedy. And I will tell you how Joe Kennedy saved that building on the way back. Right now, have your cameras at the ready, because the birthplace of downtown, where the 3 branches of the river meet, we come from the east, north, and south. Look around you, man. This is the showplace for new architecture. That building started with a curve in 1983, 333 Westwacker Drive, a prime example of contextualism. Everything's about the river, right? The curve to follow the bank as best it can, the glass reflects architecture. Can you see how that building set the bar pretty high? It said, yo, you want to build around you, you bring your A game. And everybody has. So now we have the Middle Point Tower Complex. For my California friends, Middle Point South is already being named Salesforce. Same company just did the tallest building in the Bay Area. Now I love this building in front of us, River Point. Spanish architects, Santiago Calatrava gives us that wonderful sculpture. They put an arch in to say we're special, this is where the branches of the river meet. Look how the arch is complemented with an inverted parabola at the top. causing little kids to say, Kevin, you should call this the Hot Pocket Sandwich Building. It kind of looks like the dough of that famous frozen food. I love when kids came up with that, though. You know why? Because when you give a building a nickname, that's how your brain understands. Seriously, you take something from your common experience and you apply it to something. Like this building, 150 North Riverside, comes to a point. Now, why would you do that? Because you're constricted. You have railroad tracks on the west. In fact, those porthole windows overlap. The trains go right through that building. Air rights. In the 1800s, we gave the railroads all this prime riverfront land. You couldn't take a train from New York to California that had the change trains in Chicago and leave a little jack, a few dead presidents behind. Get breakfast, lunch, dinner, right? So air rights means you're free to build as long as you lease the air from the railroad. So nobody touched the site because there's only 2-acre footprint.